I'm Kelly and welcome to Kapowski Reads, and this is my end of year wrap up and favourites video. And I didn't want to pick my favourites until I had read my final book of 2022, because what if that last book was like the best thing that I had read? So I'm filming this on the 31st in the afternoon and there's actually natural light. It's sunny in Aberdeen. It's cold, but it's sunny, so it felt like the perfect time to film. And also, I finished my last book of the year, and while it's not in my favourites of the year, it's definitely up there. It was close, so I feel very secure in my decision to wait and somewhat rush this video. Maybe I won't rush it. Maybe I'll edit it while I have a nice, snack plate. We all know that's going to happen. So, on to the stats. This year I read 210 books. That's ridiculous. That's stupid. I'd aim to read 120. 120 sounded like a very good number of books, but as I've said before, I read more when I'm stressed. I think reading 210 books tells you just how my year has gone. And the page number varies wildly from StoryGraph to Goodreads, because I think the reason for this is arcs. I know that often an advanced copy from like NetGalley or something will have a page number on StoryGraph, but not on Goodreads. Who knows which one is right? That's just the theory I'm going with. According to StoryGraph, I read 65,576 pages, but if we're going with Goodreads, then that's 63,395 pages, with an average book working out at about, well, because of the page difference, between 301, 312 pages. A nice sized book. However, that average is very much skewed by the fact that I read War and Peace this year, and this chonker is over 1,400 pages. So I think that who knows what's happening with my average there. I read a few novellas and I read this beast, so I think they've maybe evened each other out a little bit. If I had the time, I would be interested to work out what my average book length would have been if I took out the novellas and the big boy. But honestly, I'm probably not going to do that. I'm not going to calculate that. That might be something I do next year, because that actually does sound like something I would be interested to know about. Plans for next year, just happening while I'm filming. And my average rating for 2022 was a 3.5. I'm very happy with a 3.5. I've got a really bad habit of not DNFing books when I should. And I know I had over 40 books that were less than, I think, 2 stars or less than 1.5 stars. I'm very happy with that, because I was really worried that my average rating for the year was going to be pretty low because I read books that I should have just given up on. My moods for this year for reading were mysterious, dark, adventurous, and emotional. And I think that pretty much summarises not just my year of reading, but like my whole year. Very, very appropriate. And I think my most read genres will be a surprise to absolutely nobody, because my most read genre was fantasy, favourite genre, and mystery. Again, favourite genre. There was then quite a gap between fantasy and mystery and the rest of my most read genres, which were crime, thriller, classics, horror, historical, and contemporary. So basically, I think what my stats are telling me is that I read a lot of books that were in my comfort zones, and I also read a big old mix, and I'm very happy with that. So let's get on to my favourites of 2022. I had planned to have a top 10. Planned. And I kind of do still have a top 10. However, there are 12 books on my top 10. So some could argue that it's a top 12. But I would argue that there are 2 authors who have 2 books that I could not separate. So I have 2 authors that get 1 spot that shares 2 books. Logic. In my number 10 spot, I have an author who's got 2 entries, because I couldn't separate these 2 books. And in this case, they are a series, so it kind of feels fair to have them both on. And those books are A Glasgow Kiss and What Happens in Dubai by Sophie Gravia. These are absolutely hilarious books about dating life of a young woman in Glasgow. They all focus on Zara, who is 29 and kind of feels like her dating life is going nowhere, and does something about that and ends up making some interesting decisions. And her dating life is hilarious, awkward, some points are cringy. I howled with laughter reading these books. I cried. I performed dramatic readings of passages to my boyfriend. I can never eat a chicken and sweet corn baguette from Greggs ever again because of this book. I had never eaten a chicken and sweet corn baguette from Greggs, but what if I wanted to one day? And now I'll never be able to do that because this book, no, absolutely hilarious. If you are looking for like smutty reads with a really lovable character, cute found family with her little friendship group, and just to laugh, then give these two a go. I don't remember how I found these books. In all honesty, probably just from following the hashtag Scottish author. But I'm so glad I did because these have been a highlight of my year. In the number 9 spot is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I only own this on ebook, so I'll put the little picture up here. I do want to get this in hardback, and I haven't seen it in hardback apart from one time when I thought, oh, I should buy it, and I didn't buy it, and then I've never seen it again. I know I could buy it online, but with books I already own in a format, my sort of rule for myself is if I see it, I can buy it. Otherwise, be happy with the format that I own. And I haven't seen it, apart from that one time. So, again, only have this on ebook. And this is a retelling of sort of Dracula from the point of view of his bride. And it covers a long time period of her sort of living in the shadow of Dracula, also sort of finding her own feet and finding comfort in, again, her sort of found family. I thought this book was just utter perfection. It was so beautifully written. It was very lyrical, and it was told in the format of a diary, of a sort of memoir. And I thought that was a really good sort of nod back to Dracula. And I just utterly loved the characters. Constanta was just so, her growth was just so compelling. I just wanted to continue reading about her story, and I kind of wanted more. I wanted more of this, and I did not get more. The book ended in a good way, but I wanted more. In the 8th spot, I have a non-fiction. I'm as surprised as anybody else. I don't read a lot of non-fiction, but this year I feel like I read quite a lot of celebrity memoirs, and while some of them were all right, some of them I was a bit like, did we need a book? Some of them were amazing. And the most amazing memoir I have read this year is I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jennette McCurdy. I was not overly familiar with Jennette McCurdy, but in this book I absolutely fell in love with her. I own this book in physical copy and in an audiobook because I pre-ordered both, and I didn't realise I pre-ordered both. So maybe I need to start keeping track of my pre-orders a little bit better. Or maybe I just enjoy reading the book with the audiobook that was read by Jennette McCurdy herself. And I feel like that really enhanced my enjoyment of the book because you could just hear her just soul breaking as she read her story. It was such a, I don't want to say strange book, but it was an absolutely heartbreaking book where just you wanted to hug her and love her and sort of protect her, and at the same time she would make some jokes and you would be like, oh, you, such dark humor which sort of cut through the absolute sadness of her life. And I think that those sort of moments of really just dark humor is what truly separated this book from, you know, any other memoir that talks about a horrifically distressing period of life. I'm not gonna cry, but I might cry if I keep talking about this book. So I'm just gonna say I love this, and Jennette McCurdy, I hope good things happen to you because you seem really nice and you deserve nice things. Next up is The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. I said in my Vlogmas videos that I thought some December reads were going to get onto my favourite list, and at least one of them has. I toyed with the idea of putting both of the books onto my list, but being entirely honest, I much preferred this book to Once Upon a Broken Heart, also on this list, maybe having them share this spot, but I just feel I loved the sequel so much more, and I loved the first book, so you can only imagine how much I absolutely adored this. I want to just jump into this world and live in it, but like live in it as one of like the cool people. One of the cool people that kind of can just maybe be in the background, like could I be at some parties and witness all of the fun things? That would be excellent. I thought that this book gave me so much more backstory to the characters, to the fates. I know that they're featured, I think, in the Caraval series. I own it. It's still in the cellophane. I've not read it. I will read it because I want more of this. I don't know how I'm gonna manage to wait till September to get the third book, but I've already pre-ordered it. I loved the quest element of this book. I loved the cozy little world that they went to. World, is it a world? Is it just a house? Could it be both? And I just loved the way that the relationship between Evangeline and Jax just grew. It very much, there was almost like a shift in the power dynamic, which I just loved. And this book gave me a few sort of Mr. Darcy hand-holding moments where I was a bit like, so love that. I mean, it's not a small book. It's 400-ish pages, and I read it in 2 days because I had to. I couldn't put it down. Absolutely loved it. Loved the world building, got even more world building, and it's just amazing. And I really enjoyed I love when a book, fantasy book, has folk stories and mythology, and that is shared with the reader. And this book gave me so much that I just feel like I have a huge, like, rounded history of this world, these characters. Loved it. And in the 6th spot, another December read, The Shadow Glass by Josh Winning. This book is about a young man whose father dies, and his father was a director who made a series involving puppets. And his son inherits a lot of his stuff, including the puppets. And turns out that those puppets, they come to life. And the world that his father had created a series in is real. And I love that. This book just gave me vibes of all of the 80s films that I love in my soul. So, Neverending Story, Labyrinth, not Dark Crystal because it's terrifying. So let's say Legend, which involves a lot of similar puppets. And I love this book. I found myself just falling in love with the puppet characters and feeling worried that a puppet was going to get harmed because those puppets sort of started actually becoming real. It was absolutely brilliant. It gave me all the nostalgia that I didn't know I wanted. I needed a synth soundtrack. I didn't really like the main character. I didn't dislike him, but I didn't have any strong feelings about him. And yet I still loved the book. I don't need to love the main character to love the book because I loved the story and the journey and the fact that there was a quest. There was a band, a ragtag band of people that you would never put together, including puppets of foxies, and I loved it. I don't know who recommended this to me. Whoever you are, speak up and be thanked. Thank you so much. In my top 5 space, so now in the top 5, this is very exciting, is an author who gets 2 spots because it's my list and I get to choose. So that author is Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I read a lot of books by Silvia Moreno-Garcia this year. I think they were my 2nd most read author, behind Agatha Christie, who I read at least 1 book a month by. So I'm a huge fan of Silvia Moreno-Garcia. And so she had 2 books on my list. This Strange Way of Dying, which is a short story collection, and I think is the first short story collection that I have possibly ever read where I loved every single book. And that rarely happens for me. To my knowledge, I can only think of one other short story collection where I've loved every single one, and I read that book in December. So it's definitely been a year for me finding short story collections that I love, and maybe I'll read more of them in the time to come. So these short stories they're quite dark, which if you've read any books by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, you would probably expect that. They all feature some Mexican folklore, and in classic style of this author, they all take place in different time periods and different locations. They span genres as well, because some of them are horror, some of them are fantasy, some are sci-fi, and this was just a huge mixture of stories that all had that one common thread of Mexican folklore, and I loved them. And I think the sign of an excellent short story is that while you're hoping that it would exist in a full-length novel, you're not left wanting because the story was lacking. You're left wanting because the story was excellent and you want more. And I was left wanting more from every single book because I wanted more. I didn't need it. I did need it, but the story didn't need it. I, the reader, wanted more because they were excellent. So huge fan of this. And the other Silvia Moreno-Garcia book that's on my list is The Beautiful Ones. And this is a period novel. It includes a young woman with telekinetic powers, and she meets a man who has the same powers. And there starts a little relationship that almost feels doomed from the start, but it allows it actually allows both of the main characters to grow. Hector has just been living under the cloud of a broken heart, and by meeting Nina, he learns to sort of let go a little bit, try and heal, and Nina learns to embrace what makes her different. I love the setting of this. I love the sort of social expectations in this book and how Nina was not afraid to just sort of ignore them. I thought that was so fun, and I loved the gentle revelation of what had happened with Hector. And the ending of this, at the time of reading this book, I had only read books by this author that had endings that I didn't want but I needed. So I was really worried at the end of this that I wasn't going to get what I wanted. And my experience of reading this book was enhanced by the fact that one of my good friends had read it like the month before I did, so we could chat about it, and that was really fun. I love when I read books that my friends have read so that we can talk about them. And book 4 is a book that I borrowed from a friend. So again, I don't have my own copy yet, but I will one day. And that is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo. This book takes place in the 1950s in San Francisco and is basically a story of love and duty, sort of expectations. And it follows Lily and Kath. And the Telegraph Club is a lesbian bar. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I loved the sort of character growth of Lily and of Kath. And I loved the friendships that they made along the way and what they sort of learned about themselves and each other. And this book, again, utterly broke my heart. I have a habit of reading books that are set in historical periods where I know that good things are probably highly unlikely to happen to specific characters, but I still hope that they will. And I spent this whole book just being like, no, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. These will be the two that will be fine. And just, my wee heart. But this was an utterly beautiful love story, and it was just so sweet and just lovely between the two characters. And I believe that it is historically accurate as well. But this book was just layers upon layers of, bless you, that was the cat, he sneezed. I loved this book. It broke my wee heart, but it sort of patched it together again. So highly recommend, and I'm very grateful to my friend for loaning me this, so thank you. And now we're in the top 3. So my third favourite book is Other People's Clothes by Calla Henkel, which is one of the rare books that I have tabbed. I'm not a tabber. I try to be, and then I forget, or I run out of my tabs, or I don't have them when I want to tab something, so eventually I just don't. But this one, so full of tabs. I thought, so this book is about 2 exchange students from New York, go to Berlin and they rent an apartment from a somewhat eccentric author, and they start to host parties. Quite elaborate parties, and things kind of get out of hand. And they start to suspect that their landlord has been writing stories about their lives. This book was set in 2009, so it was again full of nostalgic moments for me. I was still a student in 2009. I was just finishing off my degree, and the characters are not likable at all. At all. They are awful. But at the same time, they had the worst characteristics of like my social group at the time, and I could see me of 2009 going to those clubs and living that life. So I wonder if perhaps some of my enjoyment came from like thinking it was like almost like a parallel universe, that in another life, yeah, it was very, very strange, but very enjoyable. The book itself was hilarious. I feel the writing in this was some of the best writing that I have read, that really just hits on every sort of element that I want. Like it was funny, it was dark, and it had so many quotable moments, which is why so full of tabs. And I've been quoting this book ever since I read it. And like last night I still referenced my favorite quote from this book, which is she is beautiful but no Helen of Troy. She'd be lucky to launch a singular kayak. And that is my goal. I just want to be able to launch a singular kayak. This book definitely spoke to me as somebody who was in my 20s in 2009, living that sort of chaotic life where you feel like there's going to be no repercussions. And I thought this was absolutely perfect. I didn't want to put it down. And there were some twists as well that I didn't see coming. And I just thought it was so perfectly done. Loved this. My number 2 selection. Now this is going to make me look like a liar because I've literally just said that I don't tab books. But I tabbed Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. I also spilled soy sauce on it because you shouldn't read books while eating sushi. Is a life lesson I have learned and I will share. This book is a split timeline book, and it takes place mainly at Brookhaunt's School for Girls, which was a boarding school for girls. And there were some gruesome deaths in the early 1900s. Some young women were killed by wasps, and then a few more grisly deaths happened after, which then resulted in the school having to close for good. There also was a film crew that were making a film about what happened, somewhat of a horror film. And I loved this book. I preferred the historical scenes in this, but I still like the modern day sections. You never know if there is a curse, if it's actually a curse, or if people are just making it look like there's a curse. You might hear some squawking. There is a lot of seagulls outside of my house right now, and I don't know why. Let's just acknowledge that there is probably squawking. Maybe they're squawking about how much they like this book, or maybe that's just me. But I thought that this book was so thought-provoking and so creepy and so chilling, and I just, like, I could see it in my mind, and I'm so sad that the film does not exist that they were making in this book, because I would watch that. And I love books that are set in a kind of like grand manor home and feature like, maybe there's ghosts, maybe there's hauntings, maybe there's something otherworldly. And this book just made me really just doubt what everybody was saying and try and work out what was really happening. And it just kept me guessing right from start to finish. And I absolutely loved it. And I mean, it was a big book. And I was still left going, oh, I could easily read an extra 400 pages. If there were more, I would happily have read that. I wasn't ready to let it go. But I had to, because the book was finished and the book had rounded everything up perfectly, tied it in a big neat bow, but I wanted more because I loved it. And my final book, my final favourite of 2022 is a book that I have been raving about since April, and I have no plans to shut up about it, and it's This Wicked Fate by Kalynn Bayron. And this is the second book in the This Poison Heart series, and it continues on from the last book. So I'm not gonna go too far into the plot of this in case I spoil any of This Poison Heart, which is just there, because I would not want to do that, because that book was beautiful also. So this book continues on. So we've still got Beatrice, and she has got some sort of powers that means that she can manipulate plants and basically do plant magic. Leaf magic? Plant magic. And she's got just the most beautiful family. They're so loving. And they're like 90s TV family of just, oh, can I join you? You seem excellent. So I absolutely loved that. I also loved that their family was just open to everybody, just, you know, come join. And I loved the sort of, there were found family elements in this too, which is what I love. And there was a quest. I love a quest. There was Greek mythology. Love Greek mythology. And there was magic. This book gave me everything that I wanted. Plus plants. I'm not a plant person. I can't keep a cactus alive. And I try really hard. I have the gift of killing plants. Maybe that makes me some sort of villain, but I don't mean to kill them. I just can't keep a plant alive. But I just thought this book was utter perfection. I sobbed hysterically reading this book, like hysterically. I felt ill afterwards because I was dehydrated from all the emotions, but beautiful emotions. And I'm struggling to put into words how much I absolutely loved this book, and I love this series, and it is a series that I want to reread. I might actually reread it in 2023 because I want to, and I feel it's time. I love the characters. I love the character growth. I love the sort of the conflict, the sort of think, what side are you going to go on, and questioning loyalties, and just, oh, I thought it was beautiful, and it was thought-provoking, and it was compelling, and I loved absolutely everything about this book. And I was so sad when it ended because, again, I'm really selfish when I read a book that I love and I don't want it to end. I thought this was just an absolutely perfect continuation of a series that I already loved, and I just got everything I wanted and everything I needed. And I loved the sort of mythology being brought into the modern day. That is what I love in a book. Perfect, just perfection. I loved it. So this was my favorite book of the year. Absolutely loved it. And I would love to know what your favorite books were of the year. Let me know, because I love hearing what other people's favorites were, and if we have any in common, that would be really cool to know as well. Thank you for watching. Bye.